Still, for many passengers, it's the best they've ever been treated while crossing an ocean. Some even dress up for Meal's threadbare suits, patched up lovingly, dresses ironed with the heel of a shoe. There's a pride in this journey, even if it starts in the lowest deck. And there's chatter, always chatter. Someone's heard the ship has a Turkish bath. Someone else swears they glimpsed a millionaire's dog on the promenade. You'll learn quickly that steerage runs on gossip, and everything drifts down from above deck like secondhand perfume. There's a curious sense of class awareness. Even here, you know you're in third class. You know there are people above you dining off porcelain with silver forks. But for now, you've got a warm bowl of soup and a seat at a table. And that feels like something worth holding on to. Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere dimly lit, thick with coal smoke and chatter in 20 different accents. You're below deck on the RMS Titanic, surrounded by the clink of metal cutlery and the warm scent of beef stew. The walls vibrate faintly with the hum of the engines, and the air is thick with anticipation and cabbage. You're a third-class passenger now, and dinner is served. This isn't your Instagram-worthy cruise. The dining room doesn't sparkle with crystal, and you're not getting your pick of entrees. But it's far better than you probably expecting for a few precious nights. It's a taste of hope. Still, don't get too comfy. You probably won't survive this trip. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You descend the creaking stairway into third class, your travel trunk knocking your shins with every awkward bump. The air changes colder, wetter. Below you, the heartbeat of the ship pulses. A slow, rhythmic thrum you'll learn to ignore. Bare bulbs flicker above. Everything smells faintly of coal, sea, air, and boiled vegetables. Welcome to steerage. The Titanic's third-class accommodation, often maligned as cramped or dirty, is actually something of a marvel for its time. You're not in the bilge with rats and barrels like an 1800s immigration tale. You've got a bed not straw on the floor, a real iron-framed bunk with clean white linens. There's even a shared wash basin. The hallway isn't gilded, but is functional and, in its way, cozy. And around you there are families, lovers, loners, all crammed into this web of passageways. Babies cry, teenagers bicker, older folks tell stories by lamplight. There's a Polish boy plucking at a fiddle, a woman from Donegal braiding her daughter's hair, a man from Syria humming softly while oiling his boots. This is your new world third class on the largest, most luxurious ship ever built. Your ticket was cheap, relatively speaking. About 7 pounds back then, around 800 pounds today. Enough to sting, but still a fraction of what first class paid. You and 700 others in steerage are stacked deep into the bowels of the ship, far from the dining salons and promenades. But still, you've got things many ocean goers before you never dreamed of. Decent food, clean bedding, fresh air, if you fight for a turn topside, and dreams of a better life ahead. Now here's the wild. Mid-Titanic's third-class passengers were fed in an actual dining saloon, not handed moldy crust at their hammocks. This is a sea change, pun intended, in ocean travel. Historians still argue whether this came from White Star Line's genuine concern for immigrant dignity or a calculated PR move to advertise their ships as more humane than the competition. Either way, you're reaping the benefits. The saloon itself is long, wood-paneled, and, well, Spartan, but not depressing. There are long wooden tables, heavy benches bolted to the floor, and just enough light to see your neighbor's mustache twitch as he tells a joke you don't understand. There's a sense of movement, always. The dishes rattle faintly when the ship ships. Boots scrape across the scuffed floor. You'll be assigned to a meal grouper, little cohort of hungry strangers who'll become temporary family. You might sit with a Bavarian farmer and his wife, or a Glaswegian lad with too many teeth and a suspiciously large satchel. You won't know until you get there. And here's something that might surprise you. The food? It's not bad. In fact, it's decent. Hearty, filling, served 3 times a day by a tired but brisk team of stewards who definitely didn't sign up for your questions about vegetarian options. The first time you sit at that wooden table, you feel that something in your chest unclenching. Sure, there's still the seasick toddler across from you and a woman weeping softly into her bread roll, but there's also comfort. This is warm food. This is routine. This is dignity in the middle of the Atlantic. Each section of third-class single men, single women, and families has its own set of quarters and meal schedules. You'll start to notice the rhythm. The clatter of dishes means it's mealtime. The silence afterward, that's when everyone slips into their bunks, heavy with food, emotion, and the weight of the ocean outside. But don't romanticize it too much. This is no floating hotel. You'll queue for everything, including the washroom. There are fewer baths than you care to know about. And sometimes the gravy is more mystery than meat. You wake to the low drone of engines and the scent of salt, air, and sweat. Above, metal groans faintly with the movements of hundreds of people. You swing your legs over the side of your bunk, careful not to knock the shoes left by your bunk, made cleaned and polished overnight by a steward, a small courtesy that still catches you off guard. This is life below decks, and it moves to its own rhythm. Third class on the Titanic is split by gender and family status, meaning the ship acts almost like a floating boarding house. If you're a single man, your world is forward in the bow. If you're a woman traveling alone, you're in the stern. Families like the Andersons or the O'Connors are nestled in the middle, clustered near the communal areas and, importantly, near the stairs leading up to air and dining. Each passenger is assigned a bunk in a shared room, usually housing 6 to 10 people. The bunks are stacked 2 high, sometimes 3. There's a wire mattress, a pillow, and a wool blanket that's surprisingly soft unless you're last aboard and got the one still smelling faintly of mothballs. You have a sink, sometimes even a mirror, and if you're lucky, a porthole. Not that there's much to see besides the pulsing gray blur of ocean, still, it helps to mark time. The halls are narrow and painted in pale shades, yellowed slightly from the ship's coal-fired heart. There are emergency signs tacked above doors, but the real navigation comes from memory and the help of others. You learn quickly where the fresh water taps are, which stairwell creaks the least, and which steward has a soft spot for nervous children. As you shuffle into the corridor, you feel the vibrations through the soles of your shoes, a constant, almost musical thrum. The Titanic may be a luxury liner, but down here, she still feels like a machine. Still, she is an impressive one. The third class spaces include more than just bunk rooms. There's a general room for a socializing wooden-floored lounge of sorts, where passengers gather to read, talk, or try to tune out the relentless sway of the sea. There's even a piano. It's always a little out of tune, but no one minds. It provides a beat for sing-alongs in Norwegian, Yiddish, Gaelic, and more. At times, it feels like a cultural melting pot, people from over 30 countries, all bound for America or Canada, many of them never having left their hometowns before. The common language here isn't English. It's the nod, the smile, the shared spoonful of something across the table. One quirky bit you notice after the second day. There's a code of courtesy that develops. Everyone knows it's tight down here, so passengers create invisible borders. No peeking into other bunks. No interrupting quiet conversations. And definitely no cutting the line to the toilet. Speaking of which, yes, there are toilets, and no, they're not just buckets in a closet. In fact, Titanic's third-class bathrooms are considered modern for 1,912. Still, With hundreds of passengers sharing just a handful, it's a place of both necessity and negotiation. Early birds get the cleanest stalls. You'll notice the stewards doing their best to keep things in order. Third-class passengers aren't expected to tip, unlike the upper classes, but many slip a coin to stewards after a particularly kind gesture. These crew members hustle constantly, balancing trays, scrubbing floors, and delivering updates in multiple languages with infinite patience or a sharp glare depending on their mood. Interestingly, historians still argue whether the real purpose of such well-organized third-class space was to offer dignity or simply to prevent disease outbreaks. White Star Line, after all, had a vested interest in avoiding headlines like typhoid below deck. So while everything looks generous on paper, there's a practical motive humming beneath the surface. But for passengers like you, those motives don't matter much. What matters is the small miracle of comfort in a place where you expected little. Sometimes though, the walls feel close. Maybe it's the dim lighting or the way footsteps echo like thunder when someone runs overhead. Maybe it's the smell layers of salt, soap, sweat, and stew that settle into your clothes. There's no personal space here. You're living shoulder to shoulder, breath to breath, with strangers. If you're lucky, your bunkmates are friendly. If not, well, you learn to sleep with one eye open and a shoe tied to your foot. And yet, despite it all, you adapt. You find joy in the tiny things of stories shared in broken English, a game of cards played under a swinging lamp, a child's laugh in the next cabin. The boundaries between strangers blur fast. After just a few days, you know who snores, who tells the best jokes, who's praying every night in silence. You're no longer just a passenger. You're part of a floating village. You also start hearing whispers about the rest of the ship. Some claim to have seen the grand staircase when the service door was ajar. Others swear that first-class passengers have entire bathtubs just for soaking. The idea of a swimming pool? Unbelievable. Your corner of Titanic feels removed from that reality, like a parallel world stacked right above your head. Still, you take pride in your place. Titanic was built to give you a better crossing than steerage passengers ever had before. You may not have velvet seats or champagne, but you have a warm bed, dry socks, and a real place to sit and eat your meals. And somehow, that feels revolutionary. Tonight, as you climb back into your bunk and the ship gently rocks beneath you, you wonder what New York will look like. You picture yourself standing on the deck, eyes wide, mouth open, as Lady Liberty rises from the mist. But for now, sleep comes easy in steerage if you ignore the snoring. You wake to the scent of something cooking. Not just cooking, stewing, baking, bubbling away in enormous pots that probably haven't been scrubbed since Queen Victoria was on the throne. Still, it smells good, comforting. The kind of food that fills your belly even if it doesn't impress your palate. It's breakfast time in third class, and the queue has already started forming along the corridor, winding down toward the dining saloon. You shuffle into line, half awake, hair sticking out at odd angles, your clothes creased from sleep. The others around you, some barefoot, some already buttoned and combed, murmur in a dozen different accents. You catch snippets of Irish, Swedish, Italian. You nod at the Norwegian woman ahead of you. She doesn't speak English, but you've shared a bench twice now. She gives you a tired smile. The third-class dining saloon is a surprisingly bright room for being so deep in the ship. The walls are painted white, with pine wainscoting and long communal tables bolted to the floor. Chairs, too. All firmly secured so the sea can't toss them around. The room smells like toast and tea and slightly damp wool. Still, there's sunlight. Or something like it filtered daylight trickling through small portholes. As you file in, a steward hands you a tin plate and nods toward the service counter. No menu here, no choices. Today's breakfast. Porridge with golden syrup, a hunk of fresh bread, and a mug of tea. Maybe, if the cooks felt generous, a small square of cheese. You sit, balancing your plate, and tuck in. The porridge is hot and thick enough to stand a spoon in. The tea is bitter and black, but warms your chest like a hug from your grandmother. You eat fast. The stewards are already glancing at watches, knowing another wave of passengers is waiting just beyond the door. What's astonishing is how dignified it all feels. You're not being herded like cattle. There's order, clean cutlery, napkins, well, sort of. A shared towel down the bench, but it's something. You weren't expecting much, but Titanic's third-class meals are more than just edible, they're decent. In fact, this is part of the ship's grand strategy. White Star Line wants to attract immigrants, especially families, tradesmen, the healthy and hopeful. So, they feed you well. Historically, third-class passengers on other ships had to bring their own food, cook it themselves, even sleep with livestock nearby. Titanic changes that. 3 square meals a day, no extra charge. Breakfast ends with a final swig of lukewarm tea and the polite clatter of tin utensils. You wipe your mouth with your sleeve, everyone does, and nod your thanks to the steward. He nods back, already collecting plates. You take the stairs 2 at a time back toward the general room. A few people have already started gathering there, chatting over cards or reading yesterday's paper. A child taps a toy drum over and over. No one stops him. The sound adds a strange rhythm to the hum of ship life. Now comes the odd part. Time. You have hours ahead of you and nothing you have to do. You're not a guest like those in first class, entertained with concerts and promenades. You're not staff either, racing against time and grind. You're suspended somewhere in between, in a state of half leisure. So you walk, explore, learn the turns and smells of your corridor. You find another tap where the water is slightly colder. You find a corner near the boiler bulkhead that stays warm all night. You talk with a man who swears he helped install the tiles in the second-class lavatory back in Belfast. You're skeptical. He looks like he couldn't tile a pancake. And then someone starts singing. It's an older man, voice worn like an old glove, and he's belting out a sea shanty from deep in his lungs. Others join in, feet tap. A woman grabs a wash basin and drums the beat. Suddenly, it's a party. Down here, in the underbelly of the most luxurious ship ever built, you're dancing to a song that predates the ship itself. It's strange, your stomach full, your legs moving to the beat, laughter bouncing off riveted stealing for a moment. You forget you're third class. You forget you're an immigrant. You're just human. One woman jumps onto a bench and starts miming the lyrics with exaggerated flair. The room erupts. Even the steward cracks a smile as he walks through with a mop, doing his best not to step on any toes. But as always, joy in steerage has a curfew. The singing fades, the mop finishes its circuit, and the smell of stew begins creeping in from the galley. That means lunch. And what a lunch. Today it's cabin biscuits, thick, dense bread round, meant to survive a Warren beef stew that tastes better than it looks. A chunk of boiled potato, some chewy carrot, and if you're lucky, a bit of beef that isn't entirely gristle. Protein's protein, a man mutters, tearing off a piece of bread with his teeth. Dessert? Sometimes. Raisin pudding if supplies hold up. Or stewed prunes, which inspire a range of emotions no one can fully agree on. What you notice is how quiet everyone gets during meals. It's not reverent, exactly, but purposeful. This isn't just food, it's fuel for the future. You're all chasing something, a job, a reunion, an adventure. And this stew, this pudding, it's a step closer to that dream. And just as you scrape the last bit of gravy with your biscuit, a steward passes by and says, "Dinner will be at 6. Best get some air before then." Historians still argue whether third-class passengers were truly allowed up to the open deck as freely as advertised. Some records suggest restrictions time slots, even gatekeeping stewards. Others insist that as long as you were respectful, you could wander up for fresh air and sun. Either way, you decide to try your luck. You climb the iron stairs, heart thudding with excitement. And then you're outside. Real daylight, real sky, real ocean. The wind is cold and smells of coal, smoke, and salt. But oh, the space. After the tight halls and echoing bunks, the open deck feels infinite. You grip the rail and stare into the blue-gray horizon where water and sky blur together. Somewhere out there is America. You can't see it yet, but you believe it's waiting. The cold breeze nips at your ears as you lean against the rail, letting the Atlantic wind slap you properly awake. It's the kind of chill that feels earned like proof you're really doing it. Crossing oceans, leaving behind your old life for whatever comes next. You suck in a deep breath of coal-sweetened sea air and grin without meaning to. Then your teeth chatter, and the grin becomes a shiver. You're not alone. A few other third-class passengers brave the cold with use them bundled tight in shawls and hand-me-down coats. Others daring the wind in shirt sleeves, too proud or too poor to admit they should have packed better. One man clutches a Bible. Another, a carved wooden box he hasn't let out of his grip since you boarded. No one asks what's inside. From up here, you catch your first proper glimpse of the ship's scale. The funnels rise like towers behind you, belching smoke that leaves smudges in the sky. Crewmen stride past in uniform polished brass buttons, no-nonsense expressions. You nod. Most ignore you. A few nod back. You lean over the rail slightly, mind you. You're not that reckless sand stared down at the endless churn of water. It's hypnotic, that dull roar of ocean split by steel. Somewhere down below, in the deepest parts of the ship, the engines keep pounding, pistons moving like a mechanical heart. You imagine being down there hot, loud, reeking of grease and steam. And you're suddenly very grateful for stew, biscuits, and secondhand booze. You wander a bit, just enough to stretch your legs before retreating back down the stairwell. The warmth below decks greets you like a familiar friend. Your hands thaw as you make your way toward the general room. It's mid-afternoon now, and the space hums with quiet activity. Some folks write letters, hunched over shared tables, pausing now and then to think of what news is worth sending back home. Others mend clothes, darning socks or patching trousers with a kind of quiet determination that feels almost sacred. A little girl braids her doll's hair, her tongue poking out in concentration. Someone hums under their breath. You claim a corner and sit for a while, letting the gentle rhythm of the ship settle into your bones. It's easy to fall into it rock, sway, hum, thrum. There's something ancient about it, like you've tapped into the beat of some deep old magic that moves beneath the ocean's surface. Then comes dinner. Now, this is where third class surprises you again. Not because the food is fancy, it's not, but because it keeps coming. You queue up with the rest, get handed another warm tin plate, and sit shoulder to shoulder at the table. Tonight, boiled rabbit stew, bread, maybe a spoonful of fruit compote if you're lucky. It's not exactly five-star dining, but the warmth, the fullness, the sheer presence of food 3 times a day is more than you expected. On land, third meals were rare, especially in the months before this voyage. So you savor every bite, even the parts that taste vaguely like pencil erasers. Someone cracks a joke about the stew hopping off the plate, and the laughter rolls down the table. You laugh too, because humor is free, and right now it tastes better than rabbit. After dinner, the saloon clears out slowly. A few linger, telling stories in low voices. One man insists he once wrestled a bear in Russia. No one believes him, but everyone listens anyway. Another tells a ghost story about a ship that disappeared crossing the Atlantic's crew, found standing at their posts, frozen like statues. You get chills, probably from the story, probably. Here's where the differences between first, second, and third class start to sting just a little. Up above, the wealthy sip coffee under electric chandeliers, enjoying piano concerts and chatting about Paris fashion. Even second class enjoys reading rooms and smoke lounges. You find a quiet corner and do your best to sleep sitting up, your coat rolled into a pillow. Some folks play cards by lantern light. A young couple quietly argues in Swedish, their child asleep on the floor beside them. It's a crowded life, but it's not a cruel one. You listen to the sounds around you, snoring, whispering, the occasional creak of the hull, and the ever-present hum of the engines, your lullaby across the sea. Historians still argue whether third-class passengers truly appreciated the ship's advancements like electric lighting in their quarters or running water. Many were used to outhouses and candles, and Titanic's bare basics felt luxurious by comparison. Others, however, found the noise and crowds disorienting, longing for open sky and the smell of soil. You drift to sleep wondering where you fall in that spectrum. Do you miss your old life yet? Or is this the start of something better? The night passes slowly. Someone coughs. A baby cries. A door slams. The kind of noises that come from people packed together like sardines, no privacy, no doors, no real escape, just layers of humanity stacked in narrow bunks. You wake to your bunkmate's elbow in your side. Not intentional, just space being space. There's no morning bell in third class, just hunger. You rise with the others, eyes bleary, hair tangled, feet sore, and yet you're on the Titanic, the biggest ship ever built, the unsinkable one. You remind yourself of that with every stumble toward breakfast. Because there's one thing you know for sure. This ship, this journey, is supposed to be your gateway to a new life. And in third class, that hope tastes like porridge and bread and tea too bitter to complain about. The morning light slinks through the narrow portholes, faint and gray, but it's enough to make the metal edges of your bunk gleam like worn coins. You stretch well, as much as the ceiling allows, and slide out of bed with the practiced shuffle of someone who knows not to wake a snoring neighbor. You shuffle into your boots, run a hand through your hair, and move toward the communal sinks. They're lined up like something out of a cattle station code water only. No mirrors unless you count the sheen off the tin wall, but it's better than nothing. You splash your face, flinch at the chill, and feel the last strands of sleep drain out with the drip, drip, drip from the tap. Breakfast is already underway. The usual queue snakes down the corridor mothers with infants. Boys in suspenders, two sizes, too large. Old men holding their hats like they're church relics. The kitchen staff ladles out porridge, warm bread, and a cup of something that insists it's tea. You take it all, grateful even when the porridge is more glue than grain. This morning, the ship feels different. Not bad, just alive. You hear it in the clatter of boots on steel grating, in the low throb of engines doing their tireless work below. You see it in the flicker of excitement across faces passengers talking about what's ahead, how many days till they reach America, what they'll do when they get there, dreams being passed back and forth like candy. After breakfast, you're invited, yes invited, to a deck walk. A real one. Turns out, Titanic has specific deck spaces cordoned off for third class use. They're not exactly sun terraces, but they offer fresh air, stiff breezes, and the promise of seeing something more than beige walls and shared bunks. You step outside, clutching your borrowed scarf. The Atlantic stretches out like an infinite sheet of hammered steel, rippling and gleaming. Somewhere behind you, an officer barks something unintelligible. But you're not in trouble, and that's good enough. A mother points out a seagull to her child. The boy gasps like he's just seen a dragon. You chuckle. Truth is, you're kind of amazed too. You hadn't expected wildlife out here. Just water, more water, and maybe some fog if you were lucky. One elderly woman with a brogue thicker than her wool shawl begins to hum a song, something Gaelic and old. Others join in until a small choir of strangers are singing to the sea. It's hauntingly beautiful off-key, sure, but full of something real. Pride, maybe, memory. You hum too, even though you don't know the words. Down below, the ship's infrastructure is more than just humming. You swear you feel a rhythm in the soles of your feet. Like the Titanic is alive and breathing a steel leviathan, carrying your weight, your hopes, your suitcase, full of patched clothes, and even more patched expectations. And speaking of infrastructure, you decide to explore the parts of the ship you are allowed to see. There's talk of a shared general room mostly used for writing letters, reading, or playing cards. It's the social hub of steerage. You find it after a few wrong turns and awkward glances at signs not meant for you. Inside, it's bustling, noisy, warm, and filled with accents from all over the world. A group of Italians argue over a game of dominoes. A German man teaches an Irish woman to say good morning in his language. A boy carves a wooden toy in the corner. He offers you a turn. You politely decline. Your fingers are about as precise as hooves. One wall is covered in small announcements, mostly handwritten notes in various languages. One reads, "Dance tonight, after supper." It's unsigned, possibly unauthorized. Intriguing nonetheless. Historians still argue whether dances in third class were officially permitted or just tolerated when out of sight. What is known is that music found a way in fiddles, accordions, and voices. Joy squeezed into places no one thought it would fit. That spirit, the urge to sing, to move, to laugh refused, to sink beneath the hierarchy of decks and dining options. You spend the afternoon wandering again. The ship is like a puzzle box. No two corridors seem to align. You pass crewmen with unreadable faces, stewards who answer questions politely but briefly. The divide is visible and not hostile, just there. A polite wall, the kind made of rules, not bricks. Eventually, you find the mailroom, or rather, you find the corridor near the mailroom, since access isn't exactly open to steerage passengers. But still, you linger. Somewhere beyond those doors are sacks of letters, stories in transit. Yours might join them soon. You decide to write. Back in the general room, you borrow paper and a pencil worn down to a stub. You write to your sister, tell her about the food, the deck walk, the man who juggles apples when no one's watching. You don't mention the smell in the bunk rooms or the way your back aches from sleeping curled up. Some truths can wait. Later, you drop the letter in the slot marked U.S. Mail. It clinks gently as it falls. You feel a weird little ache in your chest, like you just sent a piece of yourself into the void, hoping it finds its way home. You grab dinner, stew again, bread again. You recognize one of the servers' no way always sneaks a little extra when no one's watching. Tonight, he winks and slides you an extra hunk of bread. It's dry, but you're smiling as you eat it. Evening settles in like fog. The lights dim slightly, and the general room empties. Some head off to sleep early. Others whisper about the rumored dance. You hesitate. Then you go. The dance isn't in a ballroom. There is no ballroom down here, but in a wide corridor near the storage room. Someone's brought a fiddle, someone else an accordion. And suddenly, there's music. Real foot-stomping, hair-whipping music. You find yourself swept into a circle, hands clapping, boots thudding. You forget your name for a while. Forget the sea. Forget the class divides in the invisible walls. For these few songs, you're not third class. You're just alive. You wake the next morning with sore legs, a dry throat, and a grin you can't shake off. That dancing, it was worth every second of sleep you gave up. Even now, you can still hear the echo of that fiddle somewhere in your bones. For a moment, you lie there, eyes on the bunk above you, listening to the symphony of snores and shifting bodies. The Titanic, for all its size and steel, never really quiets down. Once you're up and dressed same clothes, of course, but you make an effort to smooth out the wrinkles. You grab your mug and join the breakfast line again. The porridge hasn't changed, but you don't mind. You're beginning to understand that on a ship like this, the rhythm matters more than the ingredients. Predictability is its own kind of comfort. But today brings something unexpected. Laundry day. You notice it as you pass the rows of cabins and see women stringing up makeshift clotheslines between bunks. Shirts, petticoats, baby bibs all flapping gently with each roll of the ship. You join in. There's a narrow wash basin area set aside, and though it's crowded, there's a kind of unspoken system. Scrub, rinse, squeeze, wait your turn. It smells like soap and damp wool, but it feels like community. A girl near you know, older than 12, tells you this is her first time seeing the ocean. She holds up a soaked sock like it's a prize. Once your clothes are hung, you head back to the general room. Today, a man is sketching in a notebook. You peer over his shoulder and see pencil outlines of the ship, the towering funnels, the tangle of rigging, the endless railings. He doesn't look up, just murmurs, trying to remember this. You nod. You understand. The air has a quiet energy today. Rumors trickle down from the upper decks, whispers of formal dinners and string quartets, of ladies in gowns walking under electric chandeliers. You can't help but wonder if you'll ever get a glimpse of that world. Probably not. But still, the fantasy lingers like perfume from a passing stranger. After lunch, something odd happens. A steward approaches your group. He looks nervous. Behind him is a man in a dark coat holding a small notebook. Turns out they're looking for volunteers for what exactly? They won't say at first. Eventually, they explain there's a shortage of extra hands for moving cargo in one of the lower holds. It's not glamorous. It's not even entirely allowed, depending on who you ask, but you sign up anyway. They lead you down a maze of corridors. The further down you go, the more the air changes. It thickens, warmer, greasier. The heartbeat of the Titanic grows louder here, the engines thudding like a mechanical beast in its sleep. The cargo hold is immense, crates stacked like blocks, each labeled in neat black stencils, wine bottles, clothing trunks, machinery, even livestock in cages. You blink twice, but those are chickens clucking nervously from a wooden crate. You help shift a stack of heavy boxes, your hands slipping a little with sweat. It's hard work, but there's a weird pride in it. You're part of the machine now, part of what makes the ship move forward, literally and figuratively. The man in the coat eventually thanks you and sends you back up with a coin in your palm. It's not much, but it gleams. You pocket it. Maybe it'll bring luck. Back in steerage, the general room is buzzing with gossip. One woman insists she saw a first-class lady through a crack in a stairwell door, wearing feathers in her hair and a gown that shimmered like moonlight. She looked like a princess, she says. Someone else snorts. Princesses don't ride boats with chickens. A debate breaks out. It's good-natured, mostly. The conversation swirls, what the rich eat, how soft their beds are, whether their shoes have real gold buckles. It's part envy, part comedy. Everyone wants to guess what the other half lived like. Historians still argue whether this fascination stemmed from admiration or quiet rebellion. You, however, are drawn to a quieter part of the room. There, a family has laid out a small chessboard. You don't know how to play, but they offer to teach you. The rules are complicated pawns, knights, something called en passant, but you get the gist. Protect your king. Think ahead. Anticipate. That night, you skip the dancing and instead sit on your bunk, carving a chess piece out of a bit of leftover wood. It's crude, but you like how it fits in your hand. You think about strategy, about choices, about how a ship like Titanic is just a very large board with very different pieces. Before you drift off, a steward pokes his head into the bunk room. Calm seas tomorrow, he says, mostly to himself. Might even see stars. You whisper a promise to yourself to wake up early. Tomorrow, you'll go up on deck again, stand near the railing, breathe in that salt air, and maybe, just maybe, spot America on the horizon. Of course, it's not that close yet, but it doesn't stop you from dreaming. You do wake up early, just as promised. The bunk room is quieter than usual. Most folks are still tangled in dreams, their breaths rising and falling in rhythm with the hum of the engine. You slip on your shoes, grab your coat, and tiptoe past the laundry line, now stiff with yesterday's wash. The air greets you with a briny nip the moment you ascend toward the open deck. And then, there it is, the Atlantic, stretching out like an endless steel blue blanket, barely rippling under the rising sun. You blink into the horizon, but there's no America yet. Just water and sky, stitched together with mist. Still, it feels closer today, somehow. You're not alone up here. A young couple stands near the railing, bundled against the chill, sharing a piece of bread and a secret. Further down, a wiry man paces in tight, thoughtful loops, muttering to himself about celestial navigation he claims to be charting the voyage by starlight. You suspect he's at least half making it up, but his enthusiasm is strangely comforting. A steward appears, making sure no one wanders where they shouldn't. He's polite but firm, steering you away from the higher decks with a practiced gesture. Not for steerage, he says with a tight smile, but he doesn't stop you from looking. You catch glimpses of grand promenade shining railings, gleaming shoes, parasols as delicate as dragonfly wings. Back below, the breakfast queue is already forming. Today there's bread, porridge, and what someone claims are pickled herring. You take the porridge. Again, it tastes like, well, routine. But there's comfort in that now. You eat it slowly, listening to two boys argue over whether the Titanic is truly unsinkable or just really hard to sink. Everyone says it's the safest ship ever built, one of them insists, shoveling food into his mouth. Even the captain said so. The other shrugs. That's just words. Everything floats till it doesn't. Historians still argue whether the myth of Titanic's invincibility was spread by her passengers, her builders, or just clever press. But for now, it's a bedtime story that most steerage passengers cling to with a stubborn sort of hope. After breakfast, a quiet buzz runs through the corridor. A family is celebrating a birthday. They've tied a bit of string across a bunk and hung 3 small paper flags. Someone smuggled in a treat and actual apple and they slice it reverently into paper-thin wedges to share. You get one. It's crisp, tart, and tastes like land. You spend the late morning playing game stones and circle on the floor, a bit of cards when someone lends you a deck. You win a button and lose it 3 rounds later. It doesn't matter. It's the playing that keeps your mind occupied. In the afternoon, something curious happens. A preacher stands up in the general room and starts reading from a small, warm Bible. He's not loud, and he doesn't push. People gather around more from curiosity than devotion, you think. But his voice is steady, and there's something in the way he reads soft and almost musical that holds the room still. You listen from the side, your back against a warm pipe. He reads about journeys, about storms, about great ships caught in tempests. Fitting, really. When he finishes, no one claps, but no one walks away either. It feels like something has shifted, just a little. The silence afterward is almost holy. Later, while helping clean up a mess of spilled water, you overhear a conversation between two older women. They're reminiscing about Ireland, about home. One of them says she buried a piece of turf from her family's hearth in her trunk for luck. Brought the fire with me, she says, tapping her chest. The other nods, eyes wet. We'll build new hearths. You don't say anything, but the words stay with you. Dinner is the same as ever hearty, simple, and communal. But as you sit there, eating thick slices of bread and listening to someone hum a lullaby in Gaelic, you realize how much your world has changed in just a few days. You know names now. You recognize footsteps. You've memorized the curve of the corridors, the rhythm of the ship. You're not just a passenger anymore. You're a thread in this strange floating tapestry. That night, the dancing resonates. You clap along, half dancing, half laughing, watching a toddler try to mimic the grown-ups. A girl with wild red curls grabs your hand and spins you without warning. You're dizzy before the first verse ends. The floor is warm from so many stomping feet. But something's different tonight. There's a slight list to the ship, just enough to feel if you're paying attention. You ask someone if they feel it too. It's nothing, they say. Just a turn. Ships do that. And maybe they're right. You nod and let it go. Later, you return to your bunk, past the fluttering clothes, past the chessboard with its carved pawns. Someone's drawn a crude sketch of the ship on the wall using a stub of charcoal. It looks like a floating castle. You lie down, the ceiling low, and the noise comforting. All around you, dreams bubble up from thin mattresses and second-hand blankets. Someone murmurs a prayer in another language. A child giggles in their sleep. And you lie there wondering what tomorrow will bring. Not America, not yet, but something. There's always something new on this ship. That's the strange magic of it. Every corridor, every bunk, every facet's a small part of something impossibly big. You close your eyes. The engines thrum beneath you like a heartbeat. You wake before the hum of the ship changes. Before footsteps shuffle above and before someone yells about spilled tea, you wake because something feels different. You can't name it yet. It's not panic, not fear, but a prickling sort of stillness that clings to the air. The room is dark, except for the soft yellow glow of a single flickering bulb. You sit up slowly, listening. Nothing. Not even the usual groan of pipes or creaks from the hull. Just silence, like the ship itself is holding its breath. You slip on your boots and nudge the girl sleeping beside you just enough to say, stay put. Others are stirring now too, blinking into the quiet. A man passes by the open door, barefoot, muttering to himself about the cold. Then the whisper travels down the corridor like a breeze before a storm. We've stopped. You follow the others toward the stairs, not running, but faster than a walk. Up one level, then another, and then cold. You feel it before you see it. The kind of cold that seeps into your clothes, your skin, your bones. You step outside, and everything is still. The ship is floating in a dead calm sea, flat as glass. Moonlight glints off the surface and ice. Ice is everywhere. Not towering walls like in the storybooks, but jagged white ghosts drifting silently all around. And just ahead, to the starboard side, something massive and black looms in the distance. An iceberg. The kind you don't need to exaggerate for drama. Someone says, we hit it. Another says, no, we're just avoiding it. And then a steward appears more hurried than usual but trying not to look it. Everything's fine, go back inside, no need for alarm. Historians still argue whether the crew purposely downplayed the situation to prevent panic, or if they truly didn't grasp the severity themselves. Either way, no one's sounding any alarms. Back below decks, you try to lie down again, but sleep won't come. The silence is too loud. You hear hurried footsteps now, raised voices, and then finally, message. All passengers to dress and bring life vests. Your bunkmate frowns. Is this a drill? You shrug, but your stomach twists. It doesn't feel like a drill. You grab your coat and vest. People are stirring faster now. One man is trying to put boots on his toddler while the child screams. An elderly woman clutches a framed photo. Someone laughs nervously, too loudly, and it bounces off the walls like a threat. You make your way toward the stairs again, this time in a crowd. At first, it's orderly, but then the crowd clogs, like water behind a dam. Up ahead, a metal gate, closed. A few men in uniform, first class only, orders from the bridge. A murmur rises, then louder. Someone tries to push through. He's shoved back. You press closer, not to fight, just to see. Beyond the gate, you catch glimpses of people being led up in groups. Mostly women and children. Mostly not from third class. Someone near you hisses. They're locking us in. A steward hears. That's not true, he snaps, but his face says otherwise. You'll get your turn. Just wait. A young man with an accordion starts playing a tune. Not because he's brave, but because he's terrified. And music, somehow, makes it all feel less real. Eventually, finally, a side passage opens. Another way up. You follow it with the crowd. Up narrow stairs, past steel doors, into the open again. And now, the lifeboats. Some are already being lowered. Others still hang in their davits, empty. Officers shout orders. A man tries to board with his wife and is pulled back. Women and children only. You hover on the edge of the scene, unsure where to go. A woman grabs your hand, her daughter, her niece. It doesn't matter. You're pulled forward toward a boat. You hesitate. She pushes. The officer helps you in. The boat creaks as it lowers, ropes groaning like the ship herself is crying. Above, people shout. Some plead, some pray. A few just stand there, stunned. The accordion plays again, then stops. As your boat reaches the water, the ship looms above like a mountain of lights. The contrast is dizzying. On the deck, everything is lit and moving. Down here, it's black water and stars. Someone near you whispers, "It can't sink. It's the Titanic." Someone else, older, just says, "She's taking on water fast." You glance back, and they're barely visible through the mist. You see it, the bow of the ship, dipping ever so slightly lower. People in your boat murmur, but no one screams. Not yet. The cold bites harder now. You huddle with strangers, clinging to each other for warmth and courage. Above, the lights still burn. But below, in your gut, you know, something is ending. You grip the side of the lifeboat as if it can tell you what to do next. It doesn't. Around you, the black water stretches on like a quiet threat. The surface is unnervingly smooth, reflecting the towering Titanic still ablaze with electric light, as if she hasn't yet noticed she's dying. In the distance, you hear shouting, a scream, then silence, then more shouting. Your lifeboat bobs slightly, unmoored and unsure, like everyone inside it. One woman sobs into her gloved hands. Another just stares at the ship, unmoving. The little girl beside you is shivering so hard her teeth chatter like dice in a cup. You put your arm around her because someone should. Time gets strange. You don't know how long you've been floating, watching, waiting. 10 minutes? 40? Long enough to watch the boat sink lower and the ship begin to tilt not dramatically. Just enough to feel like the set of a stage has shifted. You squint at the upper decks. Lifeboats dangle half lowered, passengers climbing awkwardly in, but you see more people now just standing at the railings, not trying to board. Maybe the boats are all gone. Maybe they've just accepted it. And then comes the music. Yes, that music. At first, you think someone in your boat is humming, but enough sound floats down from the deck itself. A quartet, then a full band. Calm, clear strings carrying through the night air. Historians still argue whether they played Nearer, My God, to Thee, or Autumn. Whichever it was, you'll remember the feeling, not the tune. Like someone was trying to tuck the ship in. Like they were playing for the sea. A man in your boat whispers, "They're playing us down." You nod because it feels true. Then a sound, a deep, horrible groan. The kind of sound steel only makes when it's being torn apart. The ship shudders. People above stumble. A few jump. The lights flicker. And then, finally, the bow plunges. Not a graceful dip. A sudden, violent descent. Like the sea just decided enough. Gasps erupt in your bowl. Some scream. Some pray. You don't even realize you're holding your breath until your lungs beg you not to. Water rushes up over the front decks, and within moments, the Titanic is at a horrifying angle. People tumble backward. The stern lifts higher and higher into the air, towering like a cathedral against the stars. Someone mutters, "She's going to break." And she does. A crack like cannon fire splits the silence. Right in the middle. Sparks explode. The power cuts. Darkness swallows the decks. For a moment, it's like she's frozen there beneath the waves, stern raised up like a monument. Then gravity wins. The back end slams down, almost flat again. For a heartbeat, it looks like she might survive. But then down she goes. Faster now. Final now. The stern lifts again, tipping nearly vertical. And then, in a moment of terrifying stillness, she vanishes. Gone. Nothing. And then, the screaming. From the water, hundreds of voices, wailing, calling names, begging, some curses, some prayers. The surface is full, now full of people, kicking, flailing, floating. You can't see them all, but you hear them. Every last voice. And you sit there in your half-full lifeboat doing nothing. Because someone, an officer, a man in charge says, "We can't go back, they'll swamp us." And no one argues. Even though part of you is already arguing inside your head. Even though that woman 3 places down keeps asking, "We have room, don't we have room?" You do. But no one moves. Because the sea is dark, and the screams are loud, and the idea of capsizing is even louder. So you float, and you listen, and the voices, one by one, fall silent. First, it's a dozen voices lost in the wind. Then only a handful. Then one, then none. That stillness from earlier returns. But now it's heavy. Now it knows. The girl beside you whispers, "Where is it?" You know she means the ship. And you also know it's not coming back. Gone, someone says. You sit in that silence for hours. Or minutes, it doesn't matter. The cold is bone deep now. You can't feel your feet. You don't even care. And then a light. Far on the horizon. Someone shouts, "A ship!" And that shout is the loudest thing you've heard since the screams faded. You stare. It could be a trick. Could be starlight. But Noi grows brighter. The Carpathia. You don't know her name yet, but you will, and you will love her like a savior. One man in your boat begins to laugh. Not happy laughter. Shocked, exhausted, grateful, broken laughter. The others just sob. A sailor waves a flare. And you wait again, but this time for something. Not death, rescue, The Carpathia draws closer, too slowly for your hope, too quickly for your fear. You cling tighter to the girl, now silent and still under your coat. Her fingers have stopped shaking. You're not sure if that's good or bad. As the rescue ship nears, the outline sharpens stall smokestacks, a line of lights, human figures leaning over the rails. They're waving, calling out. Someone throws a rope ladder over the side. A sailor in your boat mutters, "Bless their souls." The transfer is clumsy. Cold-numbed fingers fumble at ropes. A woman has to be lifted bodily up by two crewmen. One lifeboat bumps hard against the Carpathia's hull and cracks down one side. People scream, but no one falls. When it's your turn, you pass the girl upward first. She doesn't speak, doesn't even look back. Then hands reach down for you, and you grab hold, letting them pull you from the dark water into the bright, buzzing life of the deck. Warmth hits you like a slap. Blankets, shouting, steam rising from buckets. Someone presses tea into your hands. It burns, and you almost cry from the shock of it. The deck is chaos and salvation. Wet clothes everywhere. Children wailing. People clinging to strangers like family. The crew moves like clockwork, registering names, guiding the injured, wrapping shaking bodies in towels and wool. You walk because you have to move, because if you stand still, your knees might buckle. You pass a woman asking every person she sees, "Have you seen my husband? My son?" She doesn't stop. You pass a man curled in a corner, whispering to a wedding ring in his hand. You pass a steward from the Titanic. You recognize his uniform. He just sits there barefoot, staring at nothing. Eventually, you're ushered below decks. Cramped quarters, crowded bunks. The air is thick with salt and sweat and disbelief, but it's warm and dry. You find a spot against the wall. Sit, sip the tea, look around. Survivors. Not passengers anymore, not third class or first, just survivors. Someone begins to ask about names, about who didn't make it. You don't answer. You lie down instead. Pull a thin blanket up to your chin. Close your eyes, but you still see it. The tilt of the deck, the flickering lights, the cathedral rise of the stern, the black water, the music, and finally, you sleep. Epilogue. The newspapers will call it a tragedy, a disaster, a cautionary tale. They'll print names, some spelled wrong, some never found. They'll list the dead and praise the brave. Committees will convene. Testimonies will be given. Blame will be passed like a hot coal. But those who were there will never describe it as statistics or timelines or ship plans. They will talk about the silence after the sinking. They will talk about the screams that filled the code. They will talk about the music. And some night, years from now, you will wake up sweating, heart racing, swearing you heard a violin over black water. And maybe you did. Because history remembers the Titanic. But you lived it. Dawn arrives reluctantly. No sunrise, just a dull grayness that seeps through the portholes of the Carpathia like an apology. You open your eyes in that kind of half-aware haze, where you're not quite sure what's dream and what's memory. The engine hum is unfamiliar, constant, a low drumbeat, reminding you that you're not in your own bed, that you don't have a bed anymore. Somewhere above, footsteps pound down the hallway, boots on metal. Voices follow some quiet, others choked with emotion. It's a strange balance, relief in the air and grief and guilt, like everyone's holding their breath at once. You rise slowly, bones stiff, muscles sore from hours of tension. The blanket around you smells like too many people wet wool, seawater, maybe even kerosene. You ignore it. You're too tired to care. Above deck, things are different now. The panic has drained away, replaced by an exhausted quiet. People stand shoulder to shoulder, watching the sea roll by, waiting for land, waiting for something solid. The Carpathia's crew, bless them, does everything they can. Stewards hand out mugs of warm broth, biscuits, slices of orange if you're lucky. A nurse wraps your blistered fingers without comment. Another presses a note into your palm. Write your name, your hometown. We'll wire it forward. You scrawl something barely legible. Your hand still shakes. There are moments of awkward, broken joy. A mother finds her son alive in another bunk room and sobs so hard her knees give out. Two sisters reunite with a cousin they thought lost. An elderly man from second class insists on giving his boots to a boy who lost his during the sinking. Won't be needing him in New York, he says with a crooked grin. Historians still argue whether these acts of kindness were common or rare aboard the Carpathia, but everyone agrees that no one emerged unchanged. Then there are the other moments, the quiet ones, the ones where someone stares too long at the ocean and you know who they're looking for, the ones where someone tries to eat, then pushes their food away without a bite, the ones where laughter erupts short and jagged because it hurts less than crying. Some people cling to superstition. A woman insists the iceberg wasn't natural. It was a warning, she whispers, from God, from the sea, from something. No one argues. Others latch onto facto, many compartments flooded, how many lifeboats were deployed. Numbers become a kind of armor. Still others blame Captain Smith, the lookouts, Bruce Ismay, the Californian, ice warnings ignored, speed not reduced. If only, someone mutters, like it's a spell that might undo everything. One third-class man, wrapped in a borrowed coat, stares at the floor and whispers, I saw a priest go down with 20 people, praying. I was supposed to be in that group. Someone else replies, so was I. You sit beside a young woman who hasn't spoken since the lifeboat. Her fingers twitch in her lap, counting something only she understands. She doesn't respond when you speak, but she nods. Once, the Carpathia doesn't race. She proceeds carefully. Icebergs still dot the water, cold and patient. Each one makes you shudder. Somewhere, a child laughs. It's the first pure laugh you've heard since boarding. It feels too loud, too soon. Then again, maybe it's exactly what this moment needs. Later, someone brings out a violin. Not from the Titanic, this one belonged to a Carpathia crewman. He plays softly, just a simple waltz. But everyone stops. Because for a heartbeat, it sounds just like the band. And you're back there again, in the dark, on the lifeboat, hearing the last concert the ocean ever hosted. You blink hard and breathe. Just breathe. The sun breaks through the clouds around mid-morning. Finally, it hits the water in long golden streaks, turning the sea from slate to sapphire. You lean over the rail and squint at it. It looks like something new, something you can survive. Someone taps your shoulder. They say we'll be in New York by nightfall. It doesn't feel real. You're not sure if you're ready to arrive, but you nod anyway, because you're alive, and you have to do something with that. Evening sneaks in, low and amber, casting the Carpathia in soft shadows as it inches toward New York Harbor. You cling to the railing beside a dozen other third-class passengers, squinting at the haze of city lights on the horizon. There at Island, civilization, the place your dreams were always pinned to. But now, it looms like a stranger. You hear murmurs ripple across the deck. Statue of Liberty's coming up. Someone stretches on tiptoe, trying to glimpse that famous silhouette. But all you can make out is smoke and dusk and the glint of thousands of lamps dotting the skyline. There's no cheering, no celebratory brass band waiting on the dock, just the dull thunder of water slapping hull, and the occasional sniffle someone tries to hide behind their sleeve. A steward appears, clipboard in hand. All steerage to follow me, please. His voice is kind but clipped. No time for questions. You follow the line inside, past sleeping forms, past improvised bundles of clothing, past a child softly singing a tune that doesn't belong on a ship full of ghosts. The Carpathia's hallways are brighter now, but you've never felt more hollow. Eventually, you're ushered into a room plain walls, wooden benches, 2 officers near the doorway. One by one, survivors are called forward, asked for names, ages, country of origin. A priest sits in the corner, murmuring blessings for those who requested. When it's your turn, the officer barely looks up. Name? You answer. Traveling alone? You nod. Family in New York? You shake your head. He scribbles something and waves you through. You end up in another queue, your 4th one today, this time for immigration. The irony doesn't escape you. You were once a hopeful 3rd-class ticket holder. Now you're a disaster statistic being processed like cargo. Still, the process is swift. Emergency volunteers buzz around like bees in crisp uniforms, handing out blankets, bread rolls, boiled eggs. Someone offers to take your photo, you decline. You don't want to remember how you look today. Outside, the scene is electric. Journalists swarm the dock, shouting questions you can't begin to process. Were you there when it sank? Did the band really keep playing? Was the iceberg enormous? They want headlines. They want details. You want sleep. Some people give in, their eyes hollow as they repeat stories for the 15th time. Others snap. One woman slaps a camera from a reporter's hand. It shatters on the ground. No one blames her. A few lucky souls reunite with family. Tears, shouts, hugs so fierce they leave bruises. But many, like you, stand alone, clutching their borrowed satchels, their survivor ID tags, and the cold, numbing silence of what they've just endured. You're guided to a temporary sheltera church hall with cots lined up like chess pieces. It smells like fresh bread and tired feet. Volunteers move swiftly, assigning beds and distributing hot tea. A nurse gives you a new shirt. It's itchy and 3 sizes too big, but it's dry. Lying there, your mind refuses to rest. You try counting things to fall asleep. The number of lifeboats, the passengers in your boat, the screams that faded one by one. That last song, you wonder about the others. The old man who gave away his boots, the woman with the red scarf, the boy who wouldn't let go of his teddy bear. Did they make it? Are they here? Historians still argue whether the chaos of Titanic's arrival in New York was truly subdued or if the press embellished every glance and gesture. Some accounts describe dignified silence. Others claim wailing grief echoed off the dock walls. All you remember is the moment you stepped onto solid ground and realized your legs no longer trusted it. And yet you stand. The following morning, you're offered passage to a survivor's aid center. They help you write a letter home. The clerk spells out the words as you dictate. Your handwriting looks like someone else's plain. I am alive, you begin. It's all you can think to say. Newspapers scream headlines you never imagined being part of. Titanic disaster. 1,500 lost at sea. Miraculous escapes. You spot your own name once, buried in a column of survivor listings. It's surreal. You walk the city a little, trying to feel something. A cab driver refuses your fare when he hears where you came from. A street vendor gives you an apple for free. Then a passerby recognizes you. You were on it, weren't you? You nod. What was it like? You pause. How do you explain? The grandeur, the terror, the cold that reached your bones and stayed there, the sound of a ship dying. It was, you hesitate, a long night. The stranger nods slowly. God bless. Then he moves on. And just like that, you start to feel like a person again. The days after the sinking blur into one another. You're shuffled from one temporary lodging to another church basement, mission houses, sympathetic families who offer tea and awkward silences. You learn to live out of a paper bag and say thank you even when your mouth feels full of ash. You get used to the phrase Titanic survivor. It's how people introduce you now. Not your name, not where you're from, just that. A label pinned to your soul like a name tag at a funeral. You catch glimpses of yourself in shop windows, and for a moment, you don't recognize the person staring back. They look older, tired, haunted. That's not you, is it? There's talk of hearings investigations in Washington, London, even New York. You're asked to give a statement. You sit in front of a man with a typewriter who taps rapidly as you recount your story. Did you see the iceberg? Were the lifeboats full? Did the ship break in two? You try to be helpful, but your memories feel like broken glass shards, scattered, unreliable. Historians still argue whether third-class passengers were deliberately kept from the lifeboats or if it was simply the chaos of the moment. Some say the crew locked gates. Others say panicked passengers swarmed in both directions. You remember banging on a door that wouldn't open. You remember someone shouting in a language you didn't understand. You remember the taste of salt and fear. There are survivor reunions, now small gatherings in dusty halls where you sit beside people who also saw the stars that night from a lifeboat. You don't always talk. Sometimes just being there is enough. A nod, a squeeze of a hand, a shared silence that says, you remember too. But not all memories are welcome guests. Sometimes you wake up gasping. Sometimes your dreams are full of rushing water and violin music. Other times, you find yourself staring at a glass of water, imagining it tilting, spilling over the edge, drenching everything. One day, you decide to visit the Cunard offices. They've been helping some survivors find work or travel back home. You stand in line behind a woman with a baby and a man with a limp. You ask cautiously, "Can I go back to England?" The clerk nods. "There's a ship leaving next month. We'll make arrangements." You don't know if you're relieved or disappointed. In the meantime, you walk the city. You find a small cafe that doesn't ask questions. The waiter refills your cup with watery coffee and doesn't charge you for it. You sit by the window and sketch the street with a borrowed pencil. It's a poor drawing, but it feels like progress. One afternoon, a woman approaches you on the sidewalk. She's carrying a newspaper and a look of deep concern. "Excuse me, were you on the Titanic?" You nod. "Careful." She holds out a photograph. "Have you seen him?" The man in the photo has kind eyes and a crooked smile. You don't recognize him, but you take the image anyway. She thanks you and walks off before you can ask her name. That night, you tuck the photo under your pillow. Sometimes, you wonder what became of the ship itself. The wreck, the debris, the sunken dreams. Some say it broke clean in half. Others swear it went down whole. You don't know, and honestly, you don't want to. The idea of it resting on the ocean floor makes your stomach churn. You spend a lot of time by the river. It's not the ocean, but it moves. It carries things away. You sit on the bench and let the wind play with your coat. You feel the sun on your face, and for the first time in weeks, it doesn't sting. The newspapers have mostly moved on now. The headlines are about politics, scandals, baseball. Titanic is old news, but you know it'll never be old news to you. One evening, you're invited to speak at a church. Just a few people, nothing formal. They want to hear what it was like. You sit in a chair and try to begin. The words come slowly, like thawed ice. "I remember laughter at first," you say. "We thought we were on a floating palace." You pause. Then there was noise, so much noise, and the cold, and the silence afterward. They listen, wide-eyed. Someone cries quietly. When you finish, no one claps. But a man hands you a cup of tea, and someone else offers a coat for your walk home. That night, you sleep without dreaming. You step onto the deck of the SS Lapland, the ship arranged to carry Titanic's surviving crew and third-class passengers back to England. It's smaller than Titanic and it doesn't sparkle, but there's something comforting about its plainness. No brass railings, no grand staircase, just iron and wood and salt air. You grip the railing tightly as the New York skyline drifts away behind you. Some passengers wave, others turn their backs. You do neither. You just stare, wondering what life will feel like on the other side of this journey. The voyage home is quiet, uneventful, blessedly so. No icebergs, no wireless drama, just cold tea, hard biscuits, and the hum of the engine like a lullaby that never quite soothes. People speak in hushed tones. You don't use the word Titanic out loud, not yet. But in the dining saloon, when someone reaches for a second helping of bread, you catch the flicker of a grim smile and someone murmurs, "Just like the good old ship, eh?" You all laugh, hollow and brief. Historians still argue whether the trauma of third-class passengers was truly acknowledged in the months that followed. There were inquiries, sure, committees, letters, but few medals, and even fewer apologies. You never got your trunk back. You doubt you ever will. There's a copy of the British Board of Trade's report making the rounds among survivors. One page reads, "The loss of the Titanic was due to excessive speed in spite of ice warnings." You snort. That's the summary of your suffering. 2 sentences and a footnote. When the ship pulls into Liverpool, you brace yourself for the welcome. There isn't one. No brass band, no speeches, just rain and porters and the bitter stink of coal smoke. Still, someone hands you a dry crust and a smile. It's enough. You take the train north to your village. The ride is long and your seat is near a drafty window. You don't mind, you're just grateful for motion that doesn't rock like a deathbed. When you arrive, you're not sure who'll be there. Your letters home were few and you weren't even sure they arrived. But as you step onto the platform, you see a familiar face. Your sister. She clutches a woven shawl and a bunch of daisies, so wilted they look like they've survived the sinking, too. She doesn't cry. She just nods once and says, "Tea's on." You walk home together in silence. No one asks questions. The kettle whistles, the fire crackles. And for the first time since the night sky opened above the Atlantic, you feel warmth that doesn't come from friction or fear. Still, reintegration isn't simple. People stare. Some ask you to tell your story. Others avoid you entirely, as though your survival is some kind of contagion. You hear someone whisper in the grocer's queue, "That's the one from the ship," and you pretend you didn't. You dream about the ship less now, but when you do, it's never the sinking. It's the first few days, the excitement, the shuffle of feet in the third-class corridor, the way light slanted through the porthole just after sunrise. You miss it, not the tragedy, but the promise of it all. The clean start, the untouched menu. You find work, eventually. A mechanic's apprentice. You're good with your hands, and people stop asking questions once you prove yourself useful. You save what you can. You read the paper. You avoid the cinema, especially the ones playing films about shipwrecks. And then, one afternoon, something strange happens. You laugh. Not a bitter laugh. Not a reflex. A full, honest laugh. The mechanic's boy drops a wrench into a bucket and curses under his breath in a voice that cracks mid-word. It's such a perfect mess of adolescence and bad timing that you can't help yourself. It bubbles up, warm and real. You walk home with lighter steps that day. There's a small pub on the edge of town. You start going once a week. Not to drink, really just to sit, to hear music again, to hear voices that aren't panicked or pitiful. One evening, a fiddler plays a tune that sounds vaguely familiar. You close your eyes and remember the band on Titanic, playing as water kissed their ankles. "Nearer, my God, to thee," someone murmurs behind you. You open your eyes and see a man in a dark coat, another survivor. You recognize him by the way his fingers twitch on the table, like he's still bracing himself for waves that never come. You nod once, he nods back. That's all. No tears, no monologue, just two ghosts acknowledging each other before drifting off. Your world is small now, but it feels manageable. You keep a box under your bed-suit ticket stubs, a blurry photo of the ship, and a folded menu card from your third-class dinner. You don't open it often, but sometimes, when the world feels shaky again, you pull it out. Just to remember that you were there, and that you came through. Years pass. You don't count them so much as feel them, in the way your knees ache before rain, in the thinning of your hair, in the way children on the street start calling you sir without irony. Titanic becomes history. Not just your history everyone's a story told in books, whispered in museums, reenacted in pantomimes and penny novels. You begin to see her in places she doesn't belong. A soap ad claims their product was used on board. A travel brochure boasts, safer than the Titanic. You shake your head. People love symbols more than stories. You're invited once to speak at a grammar school. The headmistress says the children are learning about Edwardian travel. You stand at the front of a bright classroom, sunlight streaming through windows, and watch a dozen faces waiting to hear about death and lifeboats and freezing water. But what you give them is something different. You talk about the smell of fresh paint on a ship that hadn't finished curing, about the way third-class passengers danced in the lower decks while the ship glided like a castle on the sea, about the kindness of a man who offered you his coat without a word. And you end with a simple sentence. I was lucky. Some weren't. The children clap, awkward and sincere. Afterward, one small boy approaches and says, "Were you scared?" You look at his wide eyes and say, "Yes." But scared isn't the same as hopeless. It feels true as soon as you say it. Historians still argue whether the Titanic's tragedy changed maritime law out of genuine remorse or just public pressure. The lifeboat rules, the wireless protocols, the ice patrols, they're all named after the disaster. But it's hard to measure sincerity through legislation. You start keeping a journal, just a little one, mostly weather reports and what you had for tea, but occasionally, a memory slips in. The 14th of April never passes without an entry. You don't always write much. Sometimes it's just, still here. One day, you receive a letter from a man who says his grandmother was in your lifeboat. He found your name in a newspaper archive and wanted to thank you. For what? You're not sure. But the letter ends with, she lived to 92, had 6 children, told your story often. You frame the letter. You find that you talk about the Titanic more now. Not in long speeches, not in tearful confessions, just bits and pieces. The way the floor tilted under your boots, the taste of the hardtack biscuits, the girl who cried for her father all night and wouldn't let go of your hand. People listen. Sometimes they cry. Sometimes they ask if it was really as cold as they say. You nod, colder. You visit the seaside now and then, not for swimming, just to sit near the water, to watch the way it moves without apology. You still don't trust boats, but you like the smell of salt and the cry of gulls overhead. They remind you that some things outlast even the greatest ships. There's a rumor that a film studio is planning a motion picture, a big one, about Titanic. You receive a telegram asking for your permission to be represented. You decline. You don't want an actor miming your pain for applause. You do, however, keep a clipping from the paper about it. The headline reads, "Unsinkable" on the silver screen. You chuckle darkly. Everything sinks, eventually, but memories float. One night, you open your old box again. The ticket stub has faded. The menu is stained. The photograph is still blurry. But these things feel like anchors now, not weights. They tether you to who you were, not what you lost. A neighbor boy, curious and bold, once asked you, "Do you think the Titanic's ghost is still down there?" You smiled and said, "If it is, I hope it's dancing." That answer stayed with him, you hear later. He writes a poem about it, reads it at a local fair, wins a ribbon. You attend the unveiling of a memorial plaque. Your name is etched near the bottom, small and tidy. You touch it with your fingertips and feel the cold bite of the metal. It doesn't sting. It humbles. As the ceremony ends, someone asks if you'll say a few words. You clear your throat and say simply, "We were passengers, not heroes, but we mattered, all of us." And then, with the crowd silent, you walk away slowly, cane tapping, wind pressing gently at your coat. That night, in your journal, you write, "I didn't die at sea. I lived because of it." And you believe it. Now, as you settle beneath the covers, let your breath slow to the rhythm of the Shanat, the crashing, terrifying sea of that long-ago night, but the gentle hush of water lapping against the quiet shore. Picture the ship not in flames or panic but when it was new, proud, still lit from bow to stern like a floating city of hope. Let yourself walk again through the corridors of memory. Hear the soft hum of conversation in third class, the clink of teacups, the notes of a fiddle echoing from a corner. See the warm glow of lanterns, feel the slight sway beneath your feet, and smell fresh bread carried from the galley. You are safe now. You've been through the storm, through the cold, through the unthinkable, and still you are here, whole, breathing, remembered. Allow your mind to drift, as if aboard a calm vessel now, slowly sailing through a starlit sea. Let each worry fall overboard, one by one, until all that's left is quiet. Just the soft creak of timbers, the distant call of a gull, and the warmth of a blanket drawn up to your chin. No need to chase sleep. It's already here, waiting patiently beside you. Close your eyes, drift back, breathe. You've made it through the night before, and you'll do it again.